Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. So we're just setting up. We'll just give a couple of minutes for a few more people to join. And as we are waiting, please feel free to say hello. Use this as an opportunity to network with each other, with us. And please share with us in a chat where you're joining from, what attracted you to join this conversation, and what you want to get out of this. So please feel free to introduce yourself in a chat and let us know what you want to get out of this. Hi, Tom. How are you doing? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Evelina. It's good to see you.
Really good to have you here.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. So, Pat, how are you doing? You ready to get ahead and get started?
Ready to rock and roll. Good to be here.
Great, fantastic. So again, just re repeating for those who are just joining in now, feel free to use the chat. Feel free to as well unmute yourselves and chat with us and speak to us as well. Just bear in mind that this event is being recorded. So if you don't want that, then just send messages to us in a chat and we will read out your questions and interact this way. Otherwise, we are definitely encouraging you to unmute, get your cameras on, and have conversation with us. This event is here for you, so we want to make sure that we're answering your questions, and you'll definitely get out of this as much as you engage and as much as you put into it. So feel free to engage and make sure that you make it work for you. Okay, so just a brief introduction before we get started. So these events are part of Human Needs at Work conversation series, and I've set this up because I'm noticing that a lot of my clients and people in general that I'm speaking to are really struggling to navigate this whole pace of change, and organizations are asking for a lot of behavioral change interventions, asking for support to support people's health and well-being, asking for strategic advice, for a lot of guidance for transformation, for culture change. And it feels like people having a lot of questions, and there is no safe space for those questions to be heard, for our worries to be held. And there is lack of, in all of this noise, there is lack of clear guidance in terms of what this change really means for us as human beings and how we need to adapt. So I am intending to invite different guests as we go to have those conversations, to add these different perspectives to what it means to be human at this time of change. And this conversation, I've invited my good friend Pat um, to join me for this. And Patrick, if you don't know him, he's running a company called Team Me, which is a profiling tool for behavioral archetypes. And it's really insightful because his archetypal profiling tool matches quite closely some of my research that I'm doing on human behavior and evolutionary psychology. And it just makes it tad more simpler and easier for everyone to interact with that. So we both have different take on how individuals approaching this change differently and what does it mean for us to lead through this change. And hopefully we both can add those different perspectives and we can give you an opportunity to ask any questions you like and explore what the world looks like for employees where our jobs, as we know, are no longer gonna be the same in a year or two. So, Patrick, anything you'd like to say? You'd like to introduce yourself and say hello to those who haven't met you yet.
You know, even as you're speaking, I'm getting new ideas that I'm scribbling down here as we go, because I've looked forward to this conversation. Because I mean, for those of you who need a little background, Evelina and I sort of connected up a good few years ago, and we've kept touch ever since. And I'm always fascinated by the depth to which she goes in a whole bunch of areas that she puts some rigorous science to things that I still kind of I'm much more intuitive, albeit I'm working now with Birkbeck University Psychology Department to put some academic rigor behind what it is that I've been doing for a very long time. Um, but it's been great then. I'm joining this conversation because I want to hear some of the things that Evelina has to say, and I'm fascinated by the interaction between these two fields. And there are many people who are doing some wonderful works in terms of sort of team dynamics and personal growth and development, especially with this massively increasing pace of technology that we're all experiencing now. You know, back to that point that Evelina was identifying, which is what does it mean to be human still now? Now that we can simulate so many things that we thought were uniquely human, especially things like creativity, you know, what does it really mean? And we've got all this mimicry coming through with technology, but you know, where's our place in the midst of it? And so that's the area that we're both speaking to, but I hope to unpack from my side as well today. I've been using a particular model, and we'll unpack some of that in the session today. This model, I started to use it with individuals to help them understand what made them tick, how they show up in the world, and how they could show up in different situations. So it was one-on-one coaching. But then as I began to operate with teams, I realized how exponentially important this is because of the multiplicity of interactions that we have and how we impact each other's performance and behaviors and all the rest in the working world and in our personal relationships too. So that's kind of where it began to grow. And when we got a definition of a profiling tool to be able to actually put measurements to that, it suddenly took on a whole new meaning because we could, you know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, as you well know. But now we can put hard numbers to these very soft issues. And we began to realize that this is a very speedy way to understand where performance is sitting, where the problems might be. And it all comes back to what it means to be human. And whatever the pace of AI is doing to us, through us, for us right now, this is a wonderful opportunity to just come back to the core of what it means to be human in the midst of all of this.
Great, fantastic. So I'm really, really excited to be having this conversation with you and to explore all the questions related to this. So what people can expect from this? So we're really looking at, again, like we already said, what does it mean to be human at this time, and how can we maintain that human health and performance and organizational health and performance while working with AI, while building with AI, while transforming the world with AI. And we will look at three different kind of categories, or we're kind of structuring this conversation in these three areas. So first, we'll dive in deeper into what this means for individuals, what this means in terms of why each of us are responding differently to pressure and change and stress. And then we look at what this all means for team dynamics. What does it mean for leaders who leading those teams that are so diverse and everyone is responding with such a big differences to this current situation? And then we'll take it a level up and we look at what does it mean for entire organization? What does it mean for our strategy? What does it mean in terms of how we need to transform and augment our organization's ways of working? And what risks this whole human versus AI interaction creates for our businesses, and what can we do about this? And most importantly, what can each of us take ownership of and responsibility in terms of leading through this change? So yeah, pop in the chat if this aligns with your expectations, if this is what you want to hear. And if you have any other questions or anything else that you would like us to dive into, then please feel free to interact with us in a chat or a conversation, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so like we said already, and we recorded a couple of videos as well in preparation for this, we had conversations with other people to understand where they are at. And there is this common misconception that AI is creating risks. But the whole purpose of this conversation between me and Patrick is to really put that human angle on that and look at that AI in itself is not a risk. It's the pressures that it creates on human behavior that creates those risks. So pressure itself doesn't create those behaviors, and we will explore those specific behaviors that pressure and stress reveals and amplifies, both through that evolutionary behavioral lens and then looking at how can we map it and simplify it through this profiling tool that Patrick has to offer. Pat, do you want to add anything to this frame?
Yeah, so I think many people are rightly asking the question, am I going to lose my job because a robot can do the tasks that I always used to do and I was paid to do and I was expert at doing? And now we have robots that can do these things faster, often more accurately, although I tend to treat my chatbots as interns that constantly need guidance and refinement. But still, they are getting better and better. And it's a valid concern. How are these bots then going to cause us to make changes? Inevitably, we're going to. We can't just ignore the fact that these AIs are coming in and in many ways taking over tasks that we used to do. But really, in the midst of all of that, we have to position ourselves higher. We're not on a level with the machines saying, are they going to win or are we going to win? We do need to go through a bit of a mindset shift in order to position ourselves in a particular place in order to maximize this opportunity, rather than look at this as being a threat that we must deal with. Yeah.
So in preparation to this, I ran a little survey and I asked, how are you feeling about the future led by AI? So 71% of respondents said that they are excited because it will help me. 6% were scared because they said it will replace me. There was an option to say neutral because it's not going to affect me. So nobody obviously chose that option. We all understand that this is really affecting all of us in different ways. But 24% also responded with, I don't know yet. And I think this is really the bit that we want to feed into to give a little bit more clarity, to give you insights in terms of what this means for you and give you power back, that it's actually up to you how you utilize this tool, how you engage with this, and kind of give you a little bit of a direction in terms of how do you make the most out of it and make sure that you are not just being replaced by it, but actually are using it in a way that allows you to kind of evolve to a better human being. And we can use it strategically to evolve our organizations to play a better role in the marketplace and a society in general. Okay, so why do people respond so differently to change, pressure, and uncertainty? So here we would like to put a little poll to you to see how you specifically responding to this. Okay, so you should see a question pop up. So how do you personally respond to change and uncertainty? So here some people respond with openness and curiosity. Other people respond to that with caution and self-protection and become a little bit more kind of distant and territorial and disconnected. Some people end up really worrying and get anxious and fearful and kind of catastrophizing all of those scenarios. And then some others just say, well, there's nothing I can do. So they just surrender and just tick along and get on with it. So let's see how are you responding to that? Okay. Right, just a second, just to make sure everyone's responded. Great. Okay, so those are the results. So most of you say that you respond to that with openness and curiosity, but also there is a level of caution and protection, as obviously we don't know what's ahead and we want to protect ourselves. So now you will probably know yourself a lot of different people who will respond so differently to the same scenarios. And this is really the question that led me to studying psychology and neuroscience and human behavior to try to understand why we are so different and why some people are resilient and they seem to learn and grow and become better with challenge and pressure, and why some other people end up stressed, depressed, not wanting to live, or that environment gets the worst out of them in terms of addictive behaviors and anger and control and manipulation of other human beings and so on. So, why do you think people respond so differently, and what determines that level, how we engage differently? Feel free to um, pop some notes in a chat, but also you're welcome to just unmute yourself and speak. Tom, I feel like you would definitely have something to contribute on this question, Kenneth. So if I'm allowed to pick on you, feel free to contribute.
Yeah, I thought about how to choose an answer to that question, and you know, there's many things I could say here. I think it depends. I don't think you can just answer that question definitively. Most people took the most positive response, but clearly your sample is small, and the kind of person who was interested in attending here is probably more likely to be the person who would give that answer. But at the same time, I challenge that. I I I I think in certain circumstances people would not be open and curious to change. It depends what it is, and in the context of AI. Uh, um, uh, as Patrick has said, things are changing so fast, and actually, I think people are extremely badly informed on the whole. Like it always fascinates me how people live during wartime. If you look at it's it's always been extraordinary to me to see that how people just carry on living their lives. They've still got to go to get some food for the family and everything else. And Evelina, I don't know, in your background, in your family background, you've probably got a more visceral experience of that than some. So people survive, and I don't think people really understand where AI is going. And I'm not saying I know exactly where it's going, but it's so fundamental to so many aspects of our lives. It really is changing. And you're right, Patrick, about bots, needing guidance and all the rest of it. I've just had a proposal from someone who clearly wrote it on ChatGPT. And another one. And actually, what I did was to take the two proposals and give them to Claude and say, were they both written by AI? And Claude said, this one is absolutely typical of ChatGPT, and the other one is clearly written by a human being, and pulled up the differences, and
Yeah.
and so on. But we are still in the infancy of AI.
Yeah.
and it's growing so fast, and the motivations for it to grow are so dystopic that this is a real problem. So
Yeah.
I think I don't know why do people respond so different to change? I'm not sure they do. I think we're talking about very fundamental senses of security. So what are your personal circumstances? Um, are you in a stable relationship, and have you paid is your mortgage paid off? Um,
Yeah, I love this, Tom. I love that you're kind of diving in deeper into, and kind of challenging the whole question, are we really that different? And the answer is no, right? Because at the end of the day, there are these patterns, there are these kind of archetypal behaviors, right? That we can really notice it. And we know that there are patterns in terms of how our nervous system responds to specific situation and to specific threats in our environment and in our kind of external influences onto our internal world. So yeah, that's exactly why we want to dive into this and look at, okay, if we know that, if we can predict how people respond to this, and if we can have these patterns, then this behavior doesn't seem so disturbing, because we can see those different behaviors, but we still know that it's coming from those unmet human needs and some of the nervous system not feeling safe in that environment, and their patterns of how we choose to respond to it. So let's dive into that. So just a little quick dive in that the way our brain have evolved and the way we have evolved to live and thrive over millions of years is clearly not how we live today. And some of these distorted behaviors and crisis of mental health, huge crisis in suicides and addictions, and a lot of these materialistic unhealthy behaviors is a result of this disconnect between how our nervous system has evolved for us to thrive as human beings and how we have structured our environments in terms of how we live today. So if we look at the timeline of it, our first reptiles evolved over 300 million years ago. And then the mammals evolved shortly after. And then only 6 million years ago, we had the divergence of the very first human lineages. And when we look at the modern society of the modern world, what a tiny grain of sand that is in a huge desert of evolution. So our brains are really struggling to keep up. Our nervous system is really struggling to evolve at that pace, and we really need to learn better how to work with it instead of against it, so we can kind of adapt better and calm our brain to work with it. Now, we still have the same neural brain structures from all of these millions of years of evolution. So we have that so-called reptilian brain that governs all of these basic instincts, urges, the basic safety and survival mechanisms. Then we have those limbic mammalian parts of the brain that govern all of the emotional, social intelligence and all of our interactions. And we have that human part of the brain, these neocortex that has all of the decision making. Now, of course, this is just the most simple model that there ever is. The brain is not looking like that. And when I say the brain, it also involves a whole nervous system in our body and so on. So it's overly simplistic model, but it's just there to illustrate that really there are still some neural circuits from these old times that are still in our brain, and it all interacts to create our nervous system response to change, threat, and uncertainty. So throughout this evolution, we have evolved those human needs to satisfy our survival. And when we look at that reptilian part, there is a need of the most basic need is safety. And that is routine, familiarity, stability. We want to have certain level of status and certain level of control and predictability over what's happening next. So this level is all about resources and having control of those resources. Now, so on one hand, the way it manifests that we want certain level of predictability, we want some safety, we want some routine. But on the other hand, there is this opposite need of exploration. So we don't want things to be the same all the time. We want to have certain level of learning and growth and challenge. We want to explore some new horizons. We want to take action and move forward and look beyond that horizon line where we can't see what's there and always wonder what else is there, and what else if I cross that threshold. So this is that kind of human exploratory neocortex that always questions the logic, reason, and wonder, and allows us to dream and imagine new possibilities. And everything that we have created in the world first existed in somebody's mind. Somebody had to imagine it first before we managed to take action to create that into reality. So this exploration is much more cognitive, and it's about these kind of executive human functions, and it's about thinking versus doing, and how well we are utilizing those functions to drive action and intention. And then the third need, this is that mammalian limbic social brain, and that's our need for affiliation. So we are social beings, we've evolved to be part of the group, and we want to feel like we belong in that group, because for millions of years we would have not been able to even survive on our own. So our survival depended on part of the group. So that's why exclusion can feel so threatening to us. So we want to feel a level of equality. We want to feel recognized for something that we are good at, because if we're not contributing, if we don't have unique strengths, then there is no value for us in being part of the group, and there is a risk of being thrown out and left on our own to as food for lions, right? So that inclusion and sense of belonging is really, really important. And our emotional sense of survival still depends on that, even though in modern society we are fully capable functioning as independent individuals, but our nervous system is not built for that. And that's why it creates a lot of distortions. So this emotional side, this part of affiliation, is all about kind of giving and taking, and our interaction with others, and to what extent we are able to kind of satisfy and co-regulate with others. So we have those needs, but what happens to them under stress, threat, and pressure? So our character and our behavior is shaped by our direction of travel to which we go to extend to meet those needs. And we all approach this very differently, and we go towards something and away from something else. So when we look at safety, this is about the level of control and the level of resources that we accumulate to execute that level of control. If we go towards that, we have this very kind of healthy Patrick, I'll try to refer to some of your characters here, this kind of like sovereign type of characters, where you have a lot of control and you use that for good of others. But if you take it too far, you actually have that angry, pushy, attacking personality, where now you're actually misusing that power. If you go the opposite side, now you can relinquish some of that control, and you use that to create magic, to empower others. You are utilizing the resources that you have to create new things. And it kind of creates this more of kind of a magician role, where you have power, but actually you are using it to empower others and you use your resources to create new things. But if you take it too far and you give all of your power and all of your resources, this goes to a complete surrender and depression and the kind of completely victim mindset where you think I can't do anything, I don't have anything, and I'm not in control, and there is nothing that will ever get better. So it's really there's a healthy way of going towards and away from that creates that personality, but also we can take it too far and it becomes extreme. Then we look at exploration. So this is all about that kind of thinking versus doing, this kind of cognitive executive function. The healthy way towards it, this is that kind of warrior role, right? We know how to execute, we know how to lead, we know how to deliver things. But if you take it too far, you're actually overdoing, you are over explaining, you are over communicating, you're actually exploiting others on your journey of achieving certain things. And then when you go away from things, now this is complete disconnect and exit. Now, if you do this in a healthy way, you have this healthy sage personality where you actually, instead of doing, you hold the thinking space and you question, you ask deep insights, and you help others to shape their actions and you guide them without necessarily you leading, you just more thinking kind of personality. But take it too far and people completely disconnect, overthink, delay action, don't take any steps, and again, we can take that too far. Affiliation. So again, we're looking at balance from those. So we're looking at these healthy characters towards something, and you have this curiosity and people who lean in to support each other. You become collaborative and supportive, and you make fun. You make journey enjoyable for everyone. So there is this kind of jester personality where you can make the most out of this, and you're curious, you're excited, you are joyful, but you can take that too far and your ego takes over and you can become sarcastic, you hurt others, you laugh at others rather than laughing together at the situation, right? So you can become really nasty and hurtful if you take that too far. And you're looking for that kind of personal egoistic applause. It's all about me and, I need and I'll take what I need from others, and you sacrifice others. Or you go to the other, when you go away from, this is about pleasing and appeasing. So the healthy way of that is a character of a lover, right? Very giving, very nourishing, very nurturing. But you take that too far and you go to an absolute self-sacrifice and you're hurting yourself, and you are taking action and serving others in a way that is actually not good for you. So, Pat, what do you think? How well I'm managing to map out some of my
Yeah,
models
I
to
love
some
the
of your
way
personalities?
you're using team me language mixed in with this fundamental model of drives, and there are multiple ways of looking at why we do what we do the way that we do it. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs was key. Schindler, a model that Tony Robbins picked up on, came out with sort of 6 core human needs as well, and noticed a sort of a dichotomy of having some paradoxes in that we sometimes are dealing with both this and that. We're dealing with things like safety and exploration, which in some ways are contradictory. And so, these models have developed over time. But it has to do with core needs, but those needs are tied in with values. And so even those fundamental needs are impacted by the sort of flavor that we bring to it. And the flavors we bring to things are a more specific set of values which relate to our personality. And so this is where, yes, we're dealing with fundamental issues, but we also don't necessarily recognize the lens through which we're even looking at fundamental issues. And so this is something that we can now unpack from another perspective, that where we're looking at the archetypal characters that help to explain the way that we're now looking at the world.
Great. So before we dive into those archetypes, I just want to have a very quick question for you to see which of those needs are your core drivers. Now, we're asking this specifically about work because in reality, we all have those needs. So all those needs need to be provided in their complexity in different areas. But we all come to work for different reasons. So for some of us, work provides that familiarity and safety and routine and stability of financial income. So you know what's expected. You know that you are shaping your future and you can predict that future. For some other people, work plays more of that exploratory role, right? You want to learn, you want to push, you want to challenge your boundaries, you want to grow, and you want workplace to provide for you that environment to evolve your exploration. And for other people, you might have maybe you don't have such a good connections and links at work, and you come to work primarily for that kind of socializing, belonging aspect, and that becomes your primary need at work. So, what is the role of work for you? What's the purpose of work for you specifically, and what is that primary need? Okay, so we have a couple of responses here. So I'm just gonna share the results. So we can see that most of you shared that it's an exploration that is being satisfied by our work. So our purpose of work for us is to give us that opportunity to learn and grow. But the purpose of work for others could be to provide that routine and safety. And for others, it's connecting. So the way we show up and the way we then meet those needs, going kind of towards or away from certain things, that creates those more kind of archetypal behaviors that we can recognize. And if we can categorize that in some way to simplify that whole complex field of human behavior, then we can have tools to navigate that change a little bit more effectively. So this is, I think, really exciting part. Now I'm gonna let Pat dive in a little bit deeper into some of those archetypes that I've kind of mapped out a little bit to the behavior, but you can talk a little bit more from those archetypal roles and what it means.
Yeah, so we've mentioned some of these character types in the conversation so far, weaving them into our typical responses to any situation. And they will very often show up under pressure or show up when we're having to sort of focus or tackle a new situation that we hadn't necessarily previously had to deal with. But also you see it when people just gather together in social events or gather together for a meeting to tackle a project. And so in all kinds of situations, people do have a typical way of showing up. And the interesting thing about these particular characters is that we see them time and time again in the ancient myths, all the classic stories, even down to the sitcoms that people watch. Any long-term TV series is going to have a wonderful balance of a number of these characters. And when, the next season comes on or the next season comes on, if there's ever a gap, they will find a new character to play that role. It is incredibly predictable when you see this playing out in the way that we have stories that are shared in society. And so a little bit more detail on each of these characters. We have the sovereign, the warrior, and the sage, and these all happen to be left brain character types. Now, I know there's arguments about whether we can divide left brain, right brain so specifically. All I can say is I've seen the brain scans, and creative thought always does spark off in the right side of the brain, even though it spreads across the other areas. And you tend to see left brain types with more rational thinking sparking on that left side. The hemispheres are very clearly divided down the middle physically. Evelina can probably talk to this a lot more, but we've just, if you even just treat it as a general sort of ways of thinking, and even if you want to treat it as a metaphor, that's fine as well. But
Patrick, by the way, do you know why we have evolved this dual brain, kind of two sides of it? Why is the brain divided into two? Anybody knows?
I'll let you to answer that one more specifically.
So again, this is as you'll know, all the animals have those two distinct sides of the brain, and the purpose of that, evolutionary purpose of that, is that allows us dual focus. So if you imagine like a little bird pecking in a grain between grains of sand, picking some little bugs and so on, that requires an immense kind of dexterity in a way and attention to detail to be able to work this out. But as it's doing that at exactly the same time, it needs to be kind of subconsciously in some ways scanning the visual environment for any threat, and maybe there is some fox lurking about to eat that little bird, right? So you need to be able to do two things at the same time. So in a way, we have evolved these two sides of the brain so we can simultaneously allow for this dual focus and dual activity.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense because we're not saying that any body is one brain type or another. We've got both of those hemispheres, and they are both active all the time. But what we will tend to find when we're looking at sort of character types is that our lead character tends to be more one side or the other. There are some interesting characters in history like Einstein, who was able to bridge the two in a remarkable sort of way, swinging from one to another. But whenever we're tackling one particular thing, one point of focus, we do tend to find that it maps very nicely to one of these character types. And the reason for using a character is that it helps to explain, if you can lock down one aspect of the way that somebody's behaving or their perspective or the lens they're looking at things from a character point of view, it suddenly explains a heap of other things, related issues, grouped values that can then be assumed to some degree around the way that that person is also therefore going to tackle things. And so it's a very, very helpful way, not of kind of bottling everybody into 6 separate categories here, but to give a sense of the flavor of the energy that they bring to the situation. And we do find that everybody is a mix of all of these types, but they do dominate in particular characters. And I'd mentioned the myths and the stories. I was quite shocked when I started going, how far back do these models actually, does this model actually apply? And there are cave paintings where society is depicted on the cave wall, and you can pretty much identify every single one of these characters playing a role in their own, art from way back. So, when people say, why is Team Me any better than anything else? I say, well, it's older. Most of our models are 50 to 100 years old. We go back 38,000 years, and we bring up a cave painting that shows all of these characters. So it's been with us for a jolly long time. It is an inescapable part of what it means to be human, as is the way that this is portrayed. And so what we'll find here, we've got the left brain types. They have a specific focus. The sovereign type, the chief, the boss, is all about commanding and controlling. They just see it as their job to take the lead and to get other people to play their part. You've got the warrior types who are always just into action. You'll see those in the meeting. You give them a tiny little bit of information, they immediately want to stomp on and make sure it's happening, because happening is, if it's not happening now, it's not happening. It'll never happen. So let's make it happen. But then you've got the sage types that are the Sherlock Holmes of the world, or like Velma from Scooby-Doo, always, let me think, is this really true? Let's look at the evidence. So that's the kind of rational camp that we've got at the top. But that is balanced out with those who are much more creative and emotionally in tune. We've got the mystic types who are often regarded just as being a bit too dreamy, but they're the ones who are fabulous innovators in a company. If you don't have enough mystic, you will not be innovating fast enough. You've got the lover types who just love people connection. You throw them into a meeting with people, they just look at the room, and their first thought is, let's bring everybody together, let's make sure everybody's working in harmony, let's make sure they feel valued, and then you can go from there. And they are extremely valuable in society. You then have finally the jester who just makes light of things, because if you don't have a little bit of jester energy, things can get really, really too serious. Even the mystical stuff and the lover side of things just gets too intense. And you need to kind of challenge yourself. You need to have people who will make fun of things. In the medieval courts, the jester was the only one who could say something about the king or the queen that was disparaging without their heads being chopped off. And so there's a valuable role for these characters in the royal court as well as in society generally. And the other side of the jester, we need to note the jester when we're working with teams, because if there's high jester with any individual, we need to give them variety or they're going to start disrupting things. So even from a risk mitigation point of view, you need to get a measure of the jester in your team. So this is the way it hangs together, and as you can see, it's a balanced pattern here. There's a link between the lover and the warrior, between the sovereign and the mystic, between the sage and the jester, that ties them together. I unpack that with teams a lot more specifically, but their focus on past, present, or future, and their general mode of operation is actually keeping them together like the poles of a magnet. They're kind of pulling apart, but they're also connected, and there's some fascinating dynamics that come out from that.
Right. So yeah, just Pat, just keeping an eye on time. I think we kind of wanted to have a individual dive in, and then about the teams, and then the organization. So let's see if we can kind of move on with this. So this is how what happens to these characters under threat. So I'll let you take that.
Yeah, so you kind of alluded to this earlier on in terms of the needs under pressure and how we perform under pressure. Well, the interesting thing here is that whenever we identify that somebody is strong with sovereign, warrior, sage, for example, we also know then that when the pressure is on and they feel like their needs are not being met, they tend to push with their most typical form of energy. And so the sovereign who needs control to do what they need to do, and that can be a very healthy thing, can then overdo it. They overheat and they become the tyrant, where it's my way or the highway. You must do it this way. I must control everything you're doing as well as that I'm doing. And so that is one example. You can see for each one of these, there's an overheated state for each one. That happens if their needs are not being met. Now, if they have given it their very best shot and they still fail, they can fall into another shadow state, which is called the frozen state. And you see this playing out in films where anybody where they fail in the task they're trying to achieve, and they will switch into a very specific frozen state where they basically implode and they give up. And this is the area where therapy comes involved in some shape or form. But it's good. Sometimes you recognize people from their overheated state or their frozen state before you begin to realize who they are in their healthy state in terms of those archetypes. So this is just a simple way of summing that up.
Great, wonderful. So here's the question for you. So, what does this mean for our leadership? If we know that this whole change, AI transformation, gets the best and the worst out of people, and some people will step up and will grow with that, and others will fall into some of those shadow roles, and our whole psychological safety is threatened in so many ways, right? So, what does it mean when we put teams together? What does it mean for our leaders? And are our leaders prepared to lead through that? and what this means in terms of what we need to learn and what we need to develop, what human skills we need to develop, and what technical skills we need to develop. So here is your next little poll that we gonna share with you. And here, if you working part of the organization, part of the team, this question is about your leaders in your organization. Do you feel like your organization is well equipped to lead that change? And if you are working on your own, if you are coach, consultant, practitioner, then reflect on this. Am I ready to lead this change? And what do I need to do? So we're looking at this, whether we need to develop both human skills and technical skills to be able to navigate and lead, whether it's we need one or the other, or maybe we are fully equipped. We just need to take action. So where are our teams? Are our leaders prepared to navigate this change? And what does this mean in terms of our technical skill set and that human capacity to lead? Okay, so I'm just waiting for a few more responses. So feel free to vote and see where your company and where your team when you are at. Okay, so we can see here that most of you are responding that actually you need to develop both. We need to develop both that technical skill set and ability to understand the AI and how to work with it, as well as human skills. So here, let's just explore a little bit about what this means. And I would like to ask you if you are saying that you need both human capacity and technical capacity. What specifically do you want to learn? What specifically you feel you need to develop yourself personally, and what your organizations need to develop? So feel free to unmute and so just chat with us and share, or feel free to type in your comments in the chat. And I think here we really want to ask ourselves about, in terms of that technical capacity, are we aware enough to be able to work with it in a right way and to make use out of this? Because very often AI is used as a replacement, right? Let's just replace some of my tasks, and let's replace some of my thinking. Let's replace some of my ways of working. And that is a way to make yourself not needed. And if we really want to work with AI well, we really want to work strategically, systemically. We want to enhance what we are doing. So if you think that if AI can perform maybe 60, 70% of tasks of your job, what would still make humans valuable? And what is the role of leaders in leading those hybrid teams? And in terms of that human capacity, we have those amazing tools, but do people feel safe to experiment with the future? And are our leaders providing that psychological safety for us to navigate that change? So if people respond to that uncertainty with fear, with withdrawal, with control, what does it mean for team performance? And this is where we see a lot of conflict, where we see kind of decision-making paralysis, where no actions are being taken. You can see this on a societal level, right? Where things like housing markets are completely stalled right now, right? And nobody's buying anything because we are just afraid to take any action and to invest and be decisive about our future. So there's also to change. So if people are afraid um, of change and their safety needs are being compromised, people will try to hold on to things that they already have, and that will manifest as this huge resistance to change. And people will try to connect with others as well and try to co-regulate, but that can also create this very unhealthy office politics, right? Gossip and really negative behaviors that can undermine the culture. So looking at some of those behaviors, how are they manifesting at the team level? How are they manifesting at the cultural dynamics of our organizations? How does it affect the direction of our teams? And what does it mean for leaders, right? We need to completely rethink our workflows. We need to completely rethink our decision making and clarify the roles. We need to rethink their autonomy, who owns what. We need to define how AI changes those roles. And yeah, what happens when leaders interpret some of those stress responses as poor performance rather than unmet human needs?
That's a very good question, that last one. Um, I think that a, a lot of this is driven by the motivations of people to adopt AI, which is fundamentally underpinned by fear. So we've got to adopt AI because if we don't, we'll fall behind. But that's not part of a decent strategy. And because there's so many leadership teams that are, well, it's not even the team as a whole, I don't think, but the individuals who are driven by this fear, uh, what you're getting is a kind of fear it's percolating through businesses, and people are either going into the shadow, they're staying out of the limelight, they're keeping their head down because they just don't know anything else. Yes, you highlight housing, but I think for me it's very evident in so many organizations that they've got plenty of money, but they're not spending it because they don't they don't know how to, they don't want to, because they don't know where the world is going. So it's this huge uncertainty at board level, which then ricochets down into to the depths of organizations where people just put their head down and keep going because they don't know anything else. So
And what are those risks of not taking action, right? Because as the world is changing so fast, standing still actually means we're moving backwards and we're being left behind because of this pace. So the ability for us to act despite uncertainty, to exercise power and autonomy despite that ambiguity, to coach and support others so they actually feel psychologically safe to even experiment with some of these tools and apply it in a way that can serve both individuals and the business. How do we reduce that tension? How do we resolve conflict? How can we look deeper into organization and say, what are these unmet needs of individuals? But at the end of the day, we also have to think bigger because there is a need that your business is fulfilling in the society, in the economy. What's the purpose of your business? And that becomes so much more important. And I think that this AI will wipe out a lot of businesses who do not have that soul in it, that don't have that clear direction saying, this is why we exist. This is why we need to attract this wonderful tribe of people to come on board. And this is how we create that safety for them now to engage with these tools so we can actually add more value and we can amplify this. I know, Patrick, we had that conversation with this where AI is really as a multiplier and amplifier of whatever we've already got. So if we have that fear, if we have uncertainty, if we have doubt, it will just amplify that. If we have lack of direction, lack of clear vision, lack of clear purpose, it will just explode all of that we've got.
Mm.
And this is where we need to look at how do we provide for those needs? How do we fill those gaps? And if we think, okay, the world as we know it, not going to exist in a few years' time, what will happen to us? What if purpose of work, what if work is a way to fulfill a lot of human purpose?
Mm.
And then you suddenly take that work away, replace it with some, universal basic income. What happens to human purpose, right? And what is the role of our organizations in maintaining that? How do we approach that as leaders?
You and all your questions.
It does open up a remarkable sort of field. Something that I have in mind, and I'm discussing amongst various friends of mine, is the end game, and it's exactly what you're speaking to here, Evelina. Is that we're pitching this as well. How do we deal with the current situation? Well, we're not really going to be effective in doing that unless we actually all have an agreed end game. And that, I think, is the challenge. And that comes back to what does it mean to be human? So the discussions that I've been having with various individuals is on that end game. What happens if we imagine for a minute that we have met every human need? AI has helped accelerate everything so that health is sorted, longevity is sorted, food is sorted, safety is sorted, and it's like, well, now what? And that's a fabulous question to look at. If we don't have to earn any income, if you've got everything you could ever need in terms of all of those basic Maslowian sort of needs, and you're purely at that place of, okay, well, what do we do now? It's fascinating. But you'd mentioned this right back at the beginning, Evelina. The exploration is a key part of that. The constant human desire. This
Right.
is Star Trek to go forth and explore, and to find new worlds. That is a major, major part of it. We could unpack it greater than that. But also, bringing it back down to earth at the moment, we're under pressure in so many ways. The machines are accelerating that. It's more to do with the people who are steering the machines that are the challenge here. But can we come to a place where there's a consensus about what we're going to do with the opportunity of this situation, and how do we make sure that we all get there together rather than let people fall out of this sieve as we shake things up?
Absolutely. And I think this is again, when we are under threat, we are kind of detract back, it fall back into that those shadow behaviors, and we become overly protective, we become disconnected, and the way to lead people through that is to integrate back into this wider ecosystem. What's the purpose of work? What's the purpose of human life? What's the value of humanity on this planet? What is the purpose of this specific organization? What purpose are we fulfilling? And we often forget, I think this is again with this kind of dilemma of a lot of Western identity driven mindsets where it's all about me, and you believe that you can have and think and do anything the way you want, and it creates these really unhelpful, damaging behaviors that are not serving anyone, right? And if we lack that purpose, if we lack that clear connection with the big environment, then we destroy ourselves, our own health, our own lives, we destroy our relationships, we destroy the planet for pursuit of profits, right? Or some of these superficial material gains. So it's really time for us to think that if AI levels out the playing field And now it becomes possible for anyone to achieve things that before only, the most intelligent, the most engaged, the most educated people with all of the tools and material resources were able to have that. Now, if that levels out the playing field, these human capacities, this health and resilience and purpose and the interconnectedness of our role in the world and environment becomes so much more important. So that's the way to kind of lead through change, by trying to connect people to everything else that has place in it. So, is your company well equipped to lead through this change and transformation? Let's explore that. So, we ask here, what is your augmentation strategy? Because, like we mentioned before, just replacing something is not enough, right? We need completely different approach in terms of transforming our reality, transforming our strategy. So is your company prepared? And do we have that augmentation strategy? Or are we just playing by the ear and just adapt as we go and just see how it is? And we always kind of dragged by that change rather than having plan for mastering it. Or do we even know what augmentation strategy is? And when we look at augmentation, what does it really mean for us to live and work together with humans and augment our workflows, augment our workforce, augment our operation, augment our organizational role and ways of living? So where is your business strategy with that? And then what is your specific role in that? So when we look at your individual role in that, are you actually prepared to lead that? Is it something that you just try to use AI, but you're not using it regularly? Is it something that you use to outsource specific tasks and replace specific activities that you do? Or you are using it strategically to enhance the organization? You're taking it to the next level and you're actually building some of those autonomous systems that can operate on its own as a colleague, maybe as an employee. Or you are far ahead and you know how to train and help others and support others to make the most out of this. Okay, great. So you can have some multiple responses for some of those as well for the second question. So if you're playing different roles and using it in a different way, then you can select that. Okay, so most of you say that you'll adapt as you go, right? So we don't necessarily have that proactive approach to understand what is the role of AI, how we can utilize it, and plan strategically for it. And our approach to it is outsourcing some personal tasks. Maybe some of you are looking at more strategic approach in terms of how can I enhance it, and building, using AI to build specific autonomous agents. So Deloitte had a recent survey to see what is the plan for the use of AI in organizations. And 74% of organizations expect to deploy autonomous AI agents. So essentially creating self-operating systems that will replace some business processes altogether in the business. And they plan to do that within the next 2 years. So 74% of the businesses will have some processes, autonomous ways of business operation that are completely run by AI independently, with very little human input and collaboration. So you are working as a colleague with that autonomous agent. And 36% of companies plan to automate 10% of the jobs by the end of this year. Now, what this means that this is kind of the smaller type of thinking where you are not thinking big in terms of how you augmenting your reality and your strategy and ways of working, but you're just replacing. You're replacing some humans, you're replacing some tasks, and 10% of jobs have been planned to be replaced by the end of this year. So that's kind of the direction and picture of where we're going. And now the question is who is going to be replaced, right? And how we are utilizing this and what is our relationship with it. So there is this escalation of AI implementation, but there is also a rise of really unhealthy behaviors, toxic behaviors, blur of boundaries between work and personal life, huge levels of anxiety, stress. A lot of people are reaching out to me asking for support with even suicidal employees that workplaces didn't have to deal with before. So there's huge decline in psychological safety. And when we look at how organizations are working with AI, it really amplifies and accelerates a lot of those behaviors like we've discussed. So whatever you have in your business, your inefficiencies, your lack of clear sales processes, lack of purpose for your organization, it will crack those into open and will make it visible and can make your company very vulnerable if we don't address some of those human needs.
Can I interpose something there?
Yeah.
I'm interested really, Patrick. You've got a model that um, it's helpful, like an awful lot of models are, to help understand your own process and also if you're leading, how to understand difference amongst other people. But you're in a world, as Evelina is painting, which uh, it's a situation where leaders have got to look at, I would have thought, much more fundamental issues. So the understanding is sort of down the road. We're looking at, I don't know. I guess I'm challenging the use of a model like this in a world which is the problem is so much bigger.
Fully understood. And if we're looking at survival needs, you might just think that, okay, well, in order to survive, we need to do X. So forget all this fancy, fluffy psychology stuff. We just need to survive. But we're not actually, I mean, companies may well be in a place of questioning survival. And in terms of career, that might also be the case in terms of the threats. But I think that the first thing to recognize is that we survive better as a team rather than as individuals. And as a team, we do have the responsibility of self-awareness. And once we have that self-awareness, we can see how we are to play our own part in the light of the context of those people around us. So this is assuming that people are willing to work together in order to forge a better outcome. And in doing so, they would go in far better equipped if they had this high level of self-awareness about the things that they are willing to accept, the things they're driving to achieve, and the things they are naturally filtering out. And so I go in basically and I can say, so your tendency is to go at things this way, and that your tendency is to not give much leeway to this and this and this. Okay, how has that helped you in your past? How is that a problem for you? And whenever we're facing any kind of, VUCA situation, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, what's the rest? Chaos, ambiguity, we do find that people revert to type. And if we understand that type ahead of time, we will be able to predict their behavior under pressure. And so as these things, even if they are survival situations, we can begin to look at those dynamics and predict how people will behave as individuals and then also as a team. And those dynamics can be the very crux of survival and thriving in a challenging situation. And to lack that self-awareness and to lack the other awareness, we tend to find, especially in high stakes teams, is the very thing that causes the fractures that cause things to fall apart, even when there was an opportunity to work together and actually succeed under such pressures.
Yeah, and I think what you're highlighting here, Patrick, as well, that again, because we work in such a complex world right now and such high level of uncertainty, having more simplicity and having way reduced models can actually give people that bit of psychological safety to say, oh, actually, I know something. There is a model and framework for me, something to hold on to. So absolutely, there's no model or framework that have ever solved global crisis. That will never happen. But in terms of clarifying where we are at and just helping us to navigate this with a little bit more self-awareness and a little bit more psychological safety, I think that could be a good starting point just to build a little bit more of connection, collaboration, and a little bit more clarity. Obviously, the strategic work, the bigger pieces of that comes from the way we then engage as a team. So it's definitely needs more strategic approach to take it from there. But like here, when we look at our role, we're really looking at how we are utilizing it, how we work together, and how do we know? How do we know the direction? How do we know what's needed? How do we know that we are working even with AI in a right way? So there's definitely more questions here than answers. And if we do this well, we should be able to utilize our people as assets because we're saying, oh, people are our greatest assets, but in reality, are they? Because if they are under stress and pressure and we have huge human error mistakes that cost the business, if we have compliance breaches and fines, if we have high sickness, high turnover, if we are struggling to deliver those shareholder returns, then people are not assets, they're liability. And this is what we need to look into, at how can we make humans as our greatest assets in this world of AI. So we can shift. Most companies actually operating somewhere in the middle. Well, people are just costs, right? You kind of give and take, and there is kind of inconsistencies and difficulties, but you give something and you take something from them. And if we take it to the next level, then they should be assets and they should be driving that innovation. They should be driving growth. They should be leading the direction of the business and brand credibility from that perspective. How do we do that? So this is my diagnostic model that I use to explore more of that ecosystemic, complex relationship of artificial intelligence with our human levels of intelligence, right? So we're looking at cognitive intelligence. So this is in a way, this is a framework that could be very simply summarized into head, heart, hand, and hub. So head is your cognitive intelligence, so all of the knowledge. What is the information that we have? What we know, what we don't know, where do we get that information from, and how we build that our self-awareness. Then we look at heart, that's our emotional intelligence. So this is all about that emotional relational space. How do we feel? How do we engage with each other? How do we co-regulate with each other? And a lot of kind of these shared emotional responses can be co-regulated with our colleagues. Then we look at somatic intelligence, and that is that hand action. So this is our kind of default mode of operating, things that we do, our habits, routines, behaviors that we fall into. So what are things that the way we do things here? And then this is all surrounded by that cultural intelligence, which is innovation, really. And it's about connecting the dots with everything we know, everything we do, and the way we feel to create something new and fit in better in the world and the role that we are playing in. So when we look at, okay, so when we look from consulting point of view, what does it mean for the business? And in this world of AI, we need to work on our culture, on our strategy, on our vision, and on our innovation, which you create when you connect these dots very well. So, what is vision? This is a combination of everything that we know, uh, combined with how people feel about it. So, do we have that inspiring purpose and future vision direction that we can lead people towards? In terms of strategy, that is a combination of what we know and the knowledge and what we don't know with what we do, right? So, what is the way forward? How do we move? What's our operational plan to engage with this? And culture, it's so difficult sometimes to measure things like that, but it's really a combination of how people feel here combined with how we do things here. So when we understand the limitations and what makes people feel this way, how can we make them feel better? What is our default mode of operating and maybe some of these archetypal shadows that we fall into, then we look at how do we want to change instead, and we can engage in some of these behavioral change models to change the safety of the environment. And you combine all of these things and you get that cultural intelligence, that hub which drives then innovation and establish your business in a better place from where you can position yourself as a leader in a market and engage with technology and AI from different perspective. So yeah, any questions and thoughts on this? How do you guys see these different levels of human intelligence interacting with artificial intelligence? Tom, does that add a little bit more complexity or simplicity to to our thinking and the world in which we're in and how we're approaching it?
I like the model. Um, yeah. Uh, I suppose that I don't know it's like that's that model as I see it is the situation, but AI is an external to that. And it's sort of infiltrating it. It's like a virus, and um, we need to hang on to that. I also want to acknowledge what Patrick said a little while ago. I mean, the fundamental here is about self-awareness. And I keep on banging on about that in terms of that is the most important leadership skill right now is self-awareness because you you are really leading through unknown territory, and people look to you as the leader. Uh, what do we do, boss? What's going to happen? And the boss has got to be able to say, well, actually, I don't know, but we as a team will get through this by talking to each other, by being with each other, by communicating and all the good basics.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think it's very important where you're highlighting that, AI is kind of external force. However, we can use it internally to our advantage, or we can treat it as something that is threatening us. And I think if we balance these levels kind of intelligence in a right way, we can utilize that artificial intelligence to enhance everything. You can use as a great tool to build your self-awareness. I've attended a course recently on AI strategy and first exercises to do with that, where to extract the best of you and feed it back to AI so it actually understands how you operate and helps you to strategize and navigate the reality much better. It can be a huge personal awareness and personal development tool. But some of these prompts that we are sending to those, they're like 5 pages long. And this is not how, casually people interact with AI. So if we give people tool, there's actually been very interesting research done as well, where they ask people, are you using AI? To what extent are you using, and how good are you at using it? And a lot of people said, yeah, I'm using it. I'm good at it. I know how it works. But when you really dive in deeper and understand how they're using it as a replacement rather than really building and allowing it to enhance what they do, both as individuals and as business strategy. And also, they're using it conversationally as if it was another human being. And if we don't understand how AI really works, we're not getting the most out of it. So we really need some training. We need to upskill our organizations to be able to utilize that tool in this every aspect. And I use that in our diagnostics and as part of the training to say, okay, what does it mean? How you're making the most out of it rather than just, being prepared to be replaced by it. And I think that's definitely a big question.
I don't disagree with you. And at the same time, uh, I think that if you're going to go down that road, which is fair enough, you need to have some sort of system to check in. And maybe that's where Patrick's
Absolutely.
model gains traction, to say, how has this changed me? How am I behaving differently? Um, because it does, when you start to really interact with AI, it changes you and it changes the way that you operate in all sorts of ways, and it's insidious in a way. We don't see it happening, and it's almost like you need group check-ins to say, well, how are we different? What effect is this having? Because it does and it will.
Absolutely. And Patrick has a lot of brilliant tools and reports. I'm just going to skim quickly through this so you can see some examples where you can explore how this affects team dynamics. And again, this is just a first basic step of self-awareness and building our response to how we live through this, how we interact with other people differently, and just giving that more grounding and psychological safety so we know what's expected. And then we can look at it from team dynamics, and we can look at it for what this means for leaders in terms of leading those teams. So for all of those who are attending, we will share a link so you can get your complimentary profile and complete one for yourself and engage with Patrick and his tool and see how else it can support you and your team. You will receive People Strategy Report with some insights in terms of how to engage with our humans throughout this time. This will be emailed to you over the next few days. We'll also edit this recording and send it together with that. So just bear with me as I do my admin with that, with a bit of AI help. And I can send you our video edits. And we are also offering people performance and support call. So if you having those questions that you are navigating this reality, it is not easy to do it on your own. It's not easy to make those decisions. And it is a lot of responsibility to make those choices and decisions that affect other people. So we want to offer that support call for you, that you can take opportunity and explore that with us and see what it may look like in practice. So there we are. So as we do this, I'm just gonna pop in a final question. I'd love to know what your biggest takeaway from this was. We're not gonna share this with anyone publicly on the screen. This is just for your personal reflection. What are you taking away from it? And most importantly, what are you doing differently? Because it's so important that we're actually taking action at the back of this, that we are adjusting, adapting, we elevating ourselves, we are evolving to do with this to make the most out of this time. And we'd also like to know, are there any topics, questions that you'd like to see in the next conversation? So as I'm preparing future conversations with future guests, what questions you would like to have answered next, what topics of conversation you would like us to dive into. So yeah, so feel free to type that in and share with us. Okay, so how do you get some of these reports and calls? So this is a link to my LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me if you haven't connected yet. You can visit a website for some other services and outline of workshops that we do at Elite Mind. And here's a link below, elitemindas.me/performance, where you can book your strategy call and support conversation with me to explore this. And finally, these are your resources and link that you can get your TeamMe app. So yeah, Patrick, if you want to share this with people, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So just teamme.app, it's a web app, so you get to it through a browser. But if you want to hit on start now, it just takes 90 seconds to enter in the basic sort of details, answering questions. But as you register, down at the bottom there, it says group code, and that's my key to giving you the free report you normally have to pay for. So if you put in Elite Mind down in that group code as you fill in the rest of your details, and then you answer the details on the profile, and you get a basic result there, I will then send you the report. You saw a quick flash up on screen of that 3 or 4 page report, which gives you your full spectrum of archetypes. So that's a freebie to you for joining this call. We're keeping that open for just a month, but Elite Mind is your key to getting the free one if you do that.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for engaging with the conversation. Thank you for your comments, thoughts, suggestions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being brave enough to engage in this topic that it's quite scary for the people. And even though we say that, oh, it's exciting and I'm going to make the most out of it, what that path looks like, people still unclear and don't know how exactly to engage with that. So hopefully we can give some tools from Patrick's point of view to build that self-awareness. And from my perspective, is much more of that kind of organizational diagnostic tool in terms of how do we engage strategically, how do we lead people through this change more effectively, so we can evolve as organization and our purpose of our organization, not just us surviving as individuals, but how do we go through this and come out stronger on the other side? How do we build more resilient organizations? How do we upskill our leaders? How do we evolve the purpose of our organization to the point where we are better off as a result of this technological evolution and enhancement? So thank you, everyone. Are there any thoughts, questions, comments, any takeaways that you'd like to share before we close it down?
Thank you to you both.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all.
Well, great, and thank you.